Well, welcome back. We are beginning episode 8. My name is Barry Jones, Standards Plus History Academy. Uh, when we finished episode 7, we had just gone through all the shooting. The event has happened, and the assassination is over or has occurred. The president has been ruled dead at 1 o'clock. Um, the shooting happened at 12:30. He was declared dead at 1. And almost immediately, as we concluded episode 7, we see the Secret Service continuing its pattern of malfeasance. Now we're in the cover-up phase, and they take the limo away, fly it off to Dearborn, Michigan to scrub it clean, rebuild it. They take the clothing and they clean it, or they destroy what's not salvageable, destroying untold amounts of forensics evidence, ballistics evidence, and whatnot along the way. And again, that's all part of the plan. Uh, and what we're going to see is a continuing pattern of this. One of the reasons why it has been so difficult to solve the JFK assassination is because officials acting with the authority of the state behind them, were actively uh, either destroying evidence or tampering with evidence, changing evidence, ignoring evidence, and coming out with a report or a conclusion as quickly as possible. And it's taken decades through document dumps and the dogged research of JFK researchers, a few investigations that were peripherally connected to the assassination. And the information has had to dribble out, dribble out, dribble out. And of course, we're going to learn as we go along, a lot of the witnesses that could have shed light on some of this have died, some tragically. It's just been really, really challenging to get a full picture of what happened. But here we are 60 years later, and there has been a tremendous amount of evidence that has come out. And as a result, the picture is much clearer now than it was in 1964. So we always begin with a question, and today's question is, how did Dallas police ID its suspect so quickly? 14 minutes after the shooting, they already have his name, and it's going out over the airwaves, and we've got a manhunt, and everyone's looking for Lee Harvey Oswald. So the question is, how did they get that information so quickly, and all the chaos of the post-assassination, people running here, running there, pointing in this direction, pointing in that, cops stopping people, grabbing up cameras. Of course, the motorcade has fled the scene. Uh, you got Dallas police, you got Secret Service. It's a mess. And you got the media running around. It is absolute chaos. And so, but yet 14 minutes in to this chaos, they have a name. So I have found that the best way, the most effective way to study this, look at this, is to put it in the form of a timeline. And so we're going to reach back. Of course, the shooting we know happened at 12:30, so we're reaching back to 12:15, and then we'll go forward from there. Uh, James Jr. Jarman and Harold Norman both testified to the Warren Commission that on their way out of the building, the boss had given all the workers in the Texas School Book Depository permission to go out, take a break from work, go out onto the steps or onto the sidewalk and the curb and watch the motorcade. How many times does a presidential motorcade come by your workplace, especially in the middle of the day? So they were on their way out. As they were exiting the building, they'd come down several floors. As they were exiting the building, both of them saw Lee Harvey Oswald on the first floor, and they estimated this to be between 12:20 and 12:25. This was later corroborated by others who saw them between that time frame. And of course, they were the schedule. The schedule of the motorcade was for the motorcade to pass the Texas School Book Depository at 12:24. So it's right in that time frame when the president's motorcade would be coming by. They weren't being given a long break, but it was a break sufficient enough to come down, get a place in line, see the motorcade go by, clap, wave, get a picture, and then go back to your workstation. So anyway, between 12:20 and 12:25, they saw Oswald on the first floor. Carolyn Arnold, who was leaving the building, also testified that on her way out, which is she must have been a few minutes behind Jarman and Norman, she saw Oswald in the second floor lunchroom. And she said she turned and looked in there and saw him sitting there in the lunchroom. Clearly, she said. When asked about his movements around in the building later after he was arrested, not knowing what James Jr. Jarman said or Harold Norman said or Carolyn Arnold said, Oswald just told basically the same story. Said, I went down from my workstation to the first floor. I was going to get a Coke. Saw that there was no vending machine, which rings true because Oswald had only been working in the building about a month at this time. So he's not completely familiar with his surroundings, possibly. So anyway, went to the first floor. These are his words, to buy a Coke. There was no vending machine, so we went back to the second floor break room to buy a Coke. So that jives with Jarman, Norman, and Carolyn Arnold's story. As it turns out, the presidential motorcade was running 6 minutes behind schedule. It was supposed to have passed the Texas School Board Deposit at 12:25, be on the freeway by 12:25, but it's behind schedule, which is why it passes at 12:30 instead of 12:24. Now, just using logic, if Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin and he was shooting from the sixth floor window in the sniper's nest there, and he was operating according to the schedule, which had been put out publicly in advance, and he knew that this motorcade was supposed to be passing the building, his building at 12:24, why would he be on the first floor looking to buy a Coke between 12:20 and 12:25? And why would Carolyn Arnold see him sitting in the break room drinking a Coke at 12:25? He would most assuredly be sitting up in the sniper's nest preparing for his big moment. This is not something you can rush up the stairs at the last second and do. This is not something that you can assume that or presume that the motorcade is going to be late. It could be early. It could be right on time. Either way, you've got to be waiting. It's not like they're going to hold it up and wait for you to get into the sniper's nest so you can do what you have to do. So for him to be in the second floor break room or even on the first floor at the time he should have been in the sniper's nest is a big problem for the timeline anyway. So at 12:30, the president is shot. Okay, we've talked about that. This is the famous shot after the president is hit in the head, and now the motorcade is. You see, Clint Hill hasn't even made it to the limo yet. 90 seconds after the shooting, approximately 12:31, Officer Baker and Lee Harvey Oswald's boss, he's actually the superintendent of the Texas School Book Depository building. He's over the whole building. Roy Truly are running up the stairs. Officer Baker is one of the officers who thought that the shooting came from either the roof of the Texas School Book Depository or a window high up. And so he immediately enters the Texas School Book Depository building, sees Truly there. Truly is inside the building and says, take me up the stairs. What's the quickest way to the top of the building? So they begin running up the stairs. And when they get to the second floor, the stairway door has a window in it, and you can look through that window, right? And it looks directly into the second floor break room. It's right across from the hallway. And they see, Baker sees somebody in that second floor break room. So he bursts through the door and pulls his pistol. And there's Oswald sitting there, just like Carolyn Arnold said he was, sitting there in the second floor break room drinking a Coke, calmly, just like he's eating his lunch. And he looks at Truly and says, who is this man? And Truly says, he works here. He's supposed to be here. He works here. And so he kind of looks at him and he observes that Oswald is not sweating. He's not out of breath. He doesn't appear, he's just nonplussed. He's just sitting there drinking his Coke, kind of surprised to see them there. So he turns around, puts his pistol back in his holster, and they continue up the stairs. by 12:44, remember the shooting was at 12:30, Dallas police already has a suspect. And so that's the question, we want to answer today is how did that happen? How in the world? Uh, and they've already, Dallas police has already come across Lee Harvey Oswald at 12:31. So that means in the next 13 minutes, Oswald goes from being just a worker in a building drinking a Coke to being the chief suspect in the crime of the century. How did that happen? Well, Lieutenant Jack Rebel, here you can see the building, the Texas School Book Depository building is being sealed by the police. And Jack Rebel, who's the head of Dallas Police Intelligence, was ordered to search the building. Now, remember, Officer Baker is already in the building. And all of the workers were recalled into the building. And Jack Rebel took a roll call. He wanted to find out who was in the building, if they were supposed to be in the building, who was missing from the building. In his view, whoever was missing might immediately be a suspect. And so they took a roll call. After the search, he rode back to police headquarters, and in the car next to him in the passenger seat was an officer from ONI, which is Office of Naval Intelligence. And they just jumped in the car and off they went. And he's got a list in his hand of Texas School Book Depository employees, and he's going to cross-check those people with the roll call. In other words, he's got a list of people who should be in the building. They were employees, and then he's got a list of people who are in the building, who were in the building when he took the roll call. He's going to cross-check that after he types it up. He produces a list, and this is an image of it. And these are the people that are supposed to be, they're employees of the Texas School Book Depository. And this is information he has retrieved from the building itself. So it's probably from Human Resources. And this is information that they have on file for the employees. And you notice right at the top of his list, he's got the name Harvey Lee Oswald with an address, 605 Elsbeth. Well, Oswald had lived. This is the list that Lieutenant Jack Rebel eventually produces. And this is the list that makes Lee Harvey Oswald a suspect. You say, well, how? There's a bunch of names on there. Why does Harvey Lee Oswald stand out? Well, Oswald had lived at 605 Elsbeth a year earlier, but remember now, he's only been working at the Texas School Book Depository for about a month. So this is an old address is what it is. The Texas School Book Depository personnel file had his name not as Harvey Lee Oswald, but as Lee Harvey Oswald, and his address was 2515 West 5th Street. So the question is, where did Lieutenant Rebel, when he's going through and he's putting all these names down, this is just the page one, but you see who's right at the top. Where did he get this name that was misapplied and this incorrect address? Because the only information he has available to him to do a roll call cross-check is from the Texas School Book Depository personnel files. And they don't have a 605 Elsbeth. And they don't write his name as Harvey Lee Oswald. They write it as Lee Harvey Oswald. So where did he get this misapplied name and bad address? Because that might explain something. He must have another source. All these other people's names were correct. All these other people's addresses were correct. There's only one that got both wrong. So the question is, how did that happen? So we don't find this out until later, as you see, 1978. This is reminiscent of the dicta belt, which we don't hear about existing until 78. You remember the House Select Committee was prepared to double down on what the Warren Commission reported in 64, 14 years earlier. And then all of a sudden, the dicta belt piece of evidence emerges, and the acoustics firm said, well, it sounds like 11 shots. And they said, well, we'll swear to 4, which destroys the single shooter theory. Well, here again, we have a piece of evidence that emerges during a House Select Committee hearing that puts into question, at the very least, who this Lee Harvey Oswald is. and who's running him around, or who's who's in control of him and the information about him. According to Robert Jones, Colonel Robert Jones, who was stationed with the 4th Army Intelligence at Fort Sam Houston at the time of the shooting, he testified in 1978 that he heard from his people in Dallas that Dallas police had arrested a man identified as Alec James Heidel. Well, this is a name out of left field. We first of all, at the time he hears this, there has been no arrest, number one. So that's incorrect information. Number two, there's been no uh, uh, alert to look out for somebody named Alec James Heidel. This is the first time the name Alec James Heidel is in the public consciousness. So where did that come from? So he decides to go look in the files. You know, he's intelligence. And so he goes and he looks in the files for a Heidel, just curious if maybe military intelligence has any information on this guy. And it's cross reference to a man named Harvey Lee Oswald of 605 Elsbeth. Now, this is Colonel Robert Jones, who did this, who is testifying in 1978. This is what I found. I heard they arrested somebody named Alec Heidel. I went and looked at Heidel and military intelligence files, and it cross-referenced to a man named Harvey Lee Oswald of 605 Elsbeth. So Colonel Jones says he immediately tipped a fellow intelligence officer who just happens to be in the car with Lieutenant Jack Revel on their way to the Dallas Police Headquarters to compile this list. And he tips the officer. He says, by the way, this man is in our files, and his name is Harvey Lee Oswald, and his address is 605 Elsbeth. And so that is a huge indicator, a huge clue where Jack Revel got the name. He got the name from the ONI officer who was sitting in the passenger seat riding downtown with him, who has just received a tip from Robert Jones. Now, this is unbelievable, because this is all happening before anyone has been arrested. This is all happening before any names have been released. This is all happening before any names are even suspected to be released. This is all happening in advance, almost like somebody in military intelligence had this information parked in a file ready to go and want to get it out there as quickly as possible. And they jumped the gun just a little bit, just a little bit. So Jack Revel, when he produces the list, right at the top, the very first name, it's not even in alphabetical order. It's just right at the top is the very first name that he was given by ONI, and that is Harvey Lee Oswald, and an old address. And then from the personnel records, he gets all the rest of the names and all the rest of the addresses. But one name, out of all the names in the Texas School Book Depositor, one name is submitted to him by the Naval Intelligence Officer. And of course, we know, or we will learn later, that Oswald was in the Marine Corps, which is under the Navy, is part of the Navy. And so ONI would have an interest in Oswald, or at least to have record of Oswald. And of course, intelligence of the Army, intelligence of the Navy, intelligence of any Air Force, all these intelligence agencies work together. And so they had their man waiting to plant or seed the name of Harvey Lee Oswald into this record, which they know is probably going to produce a suspect. So from this tip that Lieutenant Jack Revel gets from ONI, who gets it from Colonel Robert Jones, we now have a few facts that we can, or items that we can conclude. Fact number one, Oswald had not yet been arrested when Lieutenant Revel made his list, meaning Dallas police did not yet have his ID, which of course we now know he had an alias, and the alias was Alec J. Heidel. Not having been named as a suspect and or arrested, they don't have any of his IDs on hand. They'll know later that he has an alias because when they arrest him, he has two IDs. He has Lee Harvey Oswald, he has Alec J. Heidel. That should have been the first time that Alec J. Heidel name even appeared. If Dallas police is running this investigation, that would be the first time that they would be aware of that. Okay. But it's not. And the reason it's not is because fact number two, military intelligence seeded the name Heidel, knowing it would lead Dallas police to Harvey Lee Oswald. And here he is, an employee of the Texas School Book Depository. Fact number three, it's clear in the timing of this that military intelligence had Oswald's info parked in a ready-to-go file. And when it was needed, boom, it was ready. And this is the days before the internet. So you're looking at hard copy files and you're communicating by phone or radio, and they had it ready. They had it ready. And here is Lieutenant Jack Revel on his way to the Dallas Police headquarters to compile this list. And boy, right at the top of the list is this information. And because they didn't get the name right, and because they didn't get the address right, it caused someone to ask the question, why do you have the name wrong? Why do you have this old address? And all the other addresses, as I indicated earlier, are correct. All the other names are correct because they're using current personnel records. Why is this one name wrong? Well, because military intelligence had the old address. Military intelligence had the name misapplied. They reversed the first and middle name and didn't think to fix it. Little clues like this tell you something. So the conclusion is military intelligence identified Lee Harvey Oswald for the Dallas police. Dallas police, in the years after this event, people would give credit to Dallas police and say, wow, that's some of the best detective work in the history of police work. 14 minutes later, to have the name of the chief suspect. Well, they didn't have the name. They didn't, through their work or through their efforts, find the name or determine what the name was going to be. It was seeded. It was given to them. It was planted. This information was planted. So that begs another question. If military intelligence is so interested in this man, Lee Harvey Oswald, that they have this file ready to go for a moment such as this, it makes you wonder about Lee Harvey Oswald's time in the military and his occupation, his real occupation, or who was behind him, moving him around like a chess piece on a chessboard. All of a sudden, you have a connection to military intelligence that needs examining. At the very least, it needs examining. So that is how Dallas police got the name of its suspect so quickly. If you liked what you heard today, or what you are hearing and watching as you go through some of these episodes, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Feel free to hit the notification bell. Feel free to hit the thumbs up. And we will be back later with episode 9. Thank you and have a good day.